Hello, and welcome back to Noir Lullaby. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy chilling tales that sing like a dark lullaby, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 1, the first time I pulled a flower from my daughter's skull, some part of me already understood what it meant. It was grief, trying to grow in a place where love should have been. Still, I ignored that thought. I told myself the dream was worth keeping. Because inside that house, we had everything the real world had taken away from us. The house was far too big for the three of us. It looked like it had been built for a family of 6, maybe even more. It had 2 stories, wide rooms, tall windows, and an old pointed roof that curved slightly at the end, like the tip of a witch's hat. It was strange. Beautiful, but strange. Billy would have loved it. No, Billy did love it. That was what I told myself every time I found my way back there. Inside the dream, there was no difference between what almost happened and what could have lasted forever. There was no hospital, no death, no terrible choices. There was only the life we should have had. And I was weak enough to be thankful for it. The first time Olivia saw the house, she didn't say anything. She just walked toward me and wrapped both arms around my body. She held me tightly. Her tears soaked through my shirt and into my shoulder. I tried not to look at her while she cried. Olivia had always been beautiful, but somehow even sadness looked beautiful on her. That thought made me feel guilty because I knew I was the reason she was crying. Or maybe I was the reason she existed there at all. Being without Olivia and Billy made the real world almost impossible to survive. So I kept returning to the house. It didn't matter how badly waking up hurt. It didn't matter what the dreams were doing to me. I needed somewhere grief couldn't completely follow. Billy, watch your feet. Olivia called from the kitchen. Heavy footsteps raced across the floor upstairs. I walked up behind Olivia as she stood at the sink and wrapped my arms around her waist. She laughed softly and flicked some water from her fingers onto my hand. I kissed the side of her neck. For one beautiful moment, everything felt normal. The footsteps upstairs slowed. Then they moved toward the staircase. A few seconds later, Billy appeared. Her backpack hung crooked from one shoulder, even though school wouldn't begin for several weeks. Seeing her standing there always did something to me. In that house, calling Billy our daughter felt completely natural. I looked at her the way Olivia always had, as if loving a child was enough to make space for her in your family. Backpack again? Olivia asked, turning away from the sink. Billy, you know school isn't today. Before Billy could answer, I walked over and picked her up. You leaving us already? I asked. Wow, not even going to say goodbye? Billy shook her head quickly. No? She laughed. Okay, fine, I said. But if I get nervous because you disappear, I'm blaming you. No. She shouted, laughing harder. I placed her back on the floor. Olivia smiled. Lunch is almost ready. Billy ran back toward the living room, still carrying the backpack. School was weeks away, but she wore it around the house like she had somewhere important to be. I laughed with Olivia, even though thinking about Billy eventually leaving us for school made something tighten inside my chest. Olivia seemed to notice. She touched my shoulder. The pressure inside me eased. I turned toward her and kissed her. Her glasses fogged slightly from the warmth between us. When the fog cleared, her bright blue eyes appeared again. "She's gonna be okay," Olivia whispered. I stared at her. Those words carried too many memories, too many things she had said before, too many moments when she tried to make me believe something terrible would somehow become okay. Then I heard it. Bleep! Olivia looked toward the ceiling. "There it is again," she said. I didn't answer. "Do you hear that?" I shook my head. Of course I heard it. I just didn't want to admit it. "Can you go check on her?" Olivia asked. When I turned toward the stairs, Olivia slapped me lightly on the backside. I looked back at her. She smiled. Everything felt so perfect. Almost perfect. There was always a shadow over the house now. Something hidden behind the bright rooms and happy voices. Something far away, buried behind the clouds, waiting. But I didn't want to think about it. This house was mine. It was ours. And I didn't want it to end. Billy's room was full of color. Toys covered the floor and shelves. She was going through a serious Ninja Turtles obsession at the time, and almost everything in the room had something to do with them. Figures, posters, coloring books, blankets. You would have thought Billy was living with grandparents from how badly we spoiled her. The funny thing was, she never acted spoiled. If she didn't get something she wanted, she never screamed or cried. She was just happy to have us nearby. That always made me proud. She sat on the floor in front of a coloring book, carefully coloring Leonardo's blue mask with a crayon. "Hey, kiddo," I said, "your mom says lunch is almost ready." Mom, the word came naturally. Olivia had earned that title long before any legal paperwork could have made it official. Billy didn't look up. She kept coloring. "Billy?" "Nothing." I stretched her name out playfully. "Billy," she finally turned. I'm coming." Her voice sounded completely normal. But something on her forehead caught my attention. I stopped smiling. At first, I thought she had stuck something there. Then I got closer. A small white flower was growing directly from her skin. The area around it looked completely healthy. There was no blood, no wound, no redness, just a thin green stem pushing through the center of her forehead with a white flower blooming from the top. I crouched beside her. "Hey, Billy? You feel that?" She frowned slightly. "Feel what, Daddy?" My heart stopped for a second when she called me that. "Daddy," I was already reaching toward the flower. I pinched the stem between two fingers. Then I pulled gently. The flower came free with a dry little snap. No blood followed. No hole appeared in her skin. It came out so cleanly that for a moment I wondered if I had imagined where it had been growing. A small white lily rested between my fingers. "Daddy?" I looked at her. My head hurts. The fear hit me immediately. Her face looked tired. Too tired. Suddenly, she looked exactly the way she had looked in the hospital. Small, weak, exhausted. I remembered the hallway. I remembered how cruel one hallway could become when there was a person you loved on one side and another person you loved on the other. "No," I whispered. Billy's expression twisted in pain. I shut my eyes tightly. "Come on," I whispered. "Not yet." The dream around me trembled. "Please, not yet." I focused as hard as I could. Give me one more minute with them. On the other side of my closed eyes, Billy cried out. Then her body went limp. Her scream tore through my head. The room broke apart. The walls disappeared. The bright colors faded. Her voice stretched thinner and thinner until it snapped into silence. I woke in my apartment. For several seconds, I stared at the ceiling. It was wrong, not the warm ceiling of our dream house. This ceiling was dark and stained with mold. The air smelled stale. Old food, dust, sweat, nothing like Olivia's cooking. My eyes burned. I stared upward until tears made everything blurry. I didn't know how long it had been since Olivia died. Weeks, months? Time had become difficult to understand. I wiped my eyes with the back of one hand and rolled onto my side. My apartment looked terrible. Clothes on the floor. Dishes left out. Trash I kept promising myself I would take outside. A framed photograph sat on the table beside my bed. Olivia was smiling in it. The picture had been taken at a park on a bright sunny day. I reached over and placed the frame face down. I couldn't look at her, not after the dream. I rolled onto my back. The silence in the apartment felt louder than anything. My hand moved to my stomach. It hurt. I had barely been eating. Sometimes I went an entire day without realizing I had forgotten food. The dreams were getting stronger. That was the frightening part. I knew I was dreaming while I was inside them. I had learned to control them, or at least I thought I had. I could create the house. I could make Olivia appear. I could bring Billy into the room. I could smell Olivia's cooking and feel the warmth of her skin. I could hear Billy laughing upstairs. Every touch felt real. Every voice sounded real. Sometimes I pressed my head against Olivia's chest just to feel her heartbeat. The dreams had become real enough to keep me alive, but every time I returned, something was slightly wrong. Something about Olivia and Billy felt less human. Their movements would pause strangely. Their smiles would last a second too long. Sometimes they stared at me when they thought I wasn't looking. And now flowers were growing from Billy. I knew I should stop. Instead, I closed my eyes. I repeated the words I always used. I tried to find my way back. Falling asleep had become easier. Building the house had become easier, too. At first, when I learned how to control the dreams, everything formed slowly. Walls would appear through white fog, then furniture, then windows, then people. This time, the living room formed almost immediately. Olivia stood beside the couch, fixing one of the gray pillows. I watched her place it down. Then she lay her head against it. She looked alive. That was the dangerous part. She always looked so alive. I walked over and rested my head against her chest. Her heartbeat touched my ear. Slow, steady, real. When I spoke to her, she answered. When she smiled, my own heart responded as if it had forgotten what she really was. But sometimes, when the conversation stopped, her smile remained, just slightly too long. Then, Billy entered the room. White flowers covered her skin. Olivia screamed, exactly the way she used to scream in the hospital. After that, I spent more and more time inside my dreams. I became determined to fix whatever was happening to Billy. I changed rooms. I rebuilt the house. I forced myself awake and started the dream again. I imagined Billy healthy. I imagined Billy laughing. I imagined her exactly as she had been before everything went wrong. Nothing worked. The lilies always came back. Sometimes Billy sat in front of the television watching cartoons while I pulled white flowers from her arms. Other times they grew from her neck, her cheeks, her shoulders, her scalp. I would carefully pinch the stems and remove them one after another. Olivia stayed beside me. Every time I removed a flower, Olivia dropped it into a large glass jar. By the time we finished, the jar was full. Billy's skin looked normal again. Almost, it seemed smoother than before. Shinier, like new skin stretched over something underneath, and her eyes seemed slower to find mine. I looked at Olivia. The expression on her face was painfully familiar. I had seen that same worry somewhere outside the dream. Asher, she whispered. What's happening to our girl? Our girl. The words broke something inside me. I held one of the lilies between my fingers. I slowly rolled its stem back and forth. Billy was watching me. No fear, no pain, no anger, nothing. She stared through the petals growing from her skin with a blank expression. Then, she turned back toward the television. I looked at Olivia. She lifted the jar and shook it gently. The lilies moved inside. Even after we removed all of them, I could still see new flowers beginning to appear across Billy's skin. Nothing I did mattered. Again, that word stayed inside me. Again, I had already lived through being powerless once. Hospital lights flashed through my memory. The smell of disinfectant. Doctors talking quietly. My own anger. A small girl asleep behind a door I could not open. My hand tightened around the flower until its petals folded and crushed. Olivia placed a hand on my shoulder. My anger weakened. One look from her still made me believe I might not be completely lost. I placed my hand over hers. She smiled. I smiled back. Then Olivia carried the jar toward the fireplace. She placed it on top like some kind of decoration. Only angels grow flowers this beautiful, she told Billy. Something changed. Billy smiled. Her eyes became brighter. Slowly, the remaining flowers disappeared. They didn't fall off. They simply stopped being there. Within minutes, Billy was herself again. Laughing, running around, trying to get us to play 3 different games at the same time. I never saw where the flowers went. That should have worried me more. Sometimes, while we were playing, I caught Billy watching me from across the room. There was no anger in her face, no hate. She simply looked through me, like I was part of the wall, like she was waiting for me to remember something I had deliberately forgotten. We never left the house in my dreams. The world outside only existed when I needed it. I could create trees, a yard, hills, open fields. But if I tried to create too much, the house changed. A wall would bend strangely. A door would appear somewhere it didn't belong. Windows would lead to the wrong rooms. So I learned to keep the dream small. The house was enough. None of the outside world mattered when Olivia and Billy slept beside me. That night, Billy lay curled against Olivia. She breathed slowly. No flowers appeared. No hospital rooms waited behind the bedroom door. For one night, I allowed myself to believe the dream might stay peaceful. There was one strange thing about these dreams. I could never fall asleep inside them. No matter how long the night lasted, I remained awake. I would lie on my back and watch the ceiling. I listened to Olivia breathe. I listened to Billy turn in her sleep. The moon slowly crossed the sky outside. Most people would probably skip these moments if they could control a dream. They would skip straight to breakfast. Laughter, games, happiness, but those quiet moments mattered to me. I had lost the ordinary parts of life, too. Beep, my eyes stayed on the ceiling. Ignore it. That was what I told myself. Ignore it, and it will stop. Beep, I closed my eyes. I focused on the silence after the sound. Then I noticed something worse. The breathing beside me had stopped. I turned. Billy was awake. She was staring at me. I smiled. She smiled back. For 1 second, that smile was enough. Then it disappeared. Billy's eyes opened wider. Too wide. The green color slowly faded from them. Her eyes became pale, almost white. Then something moved in the corners. White petals pushed through the wet skin around her eyes. Flowers began growing from her eye sockets. I couldn't move. Olivia slept beside her as if nothing was happening. Billy continued staring at me through the flowers. I closed my eyes. Make it disappear. That was all I could think. Make it disappear. In the darkness behind my eyelids, I heard the bed move. The mattress shifted. Something crawled closer. Warm breath touched my face. I concentrated harder. Nothing changed. Then I woke. I sat upright in my apartment, gasping. Sweat covered my body. My heart pounded. I looked around. Empty room. Dark walls. No Billy. No Olivia. No house. Then I looked at the nightstand. Beside Olivia's face-down photograph was a single white lily. For a long time, I didn't touch it. I stared. Every time I blinked, I expected the flower to change. Maybe it would move. Maybe it would open wider. Maybe it would breathe. It did nothing. It simply rested there. Impossible. I touched my forehead. Nothing was growing from it. My hand moved down to my stomach. Hunger twisted inside me. My body wanted food. But as I stood, memories of the dream returned. Olivia's laugh. Billy's voice. The smell of food in our kitchen. How happy they looked when I simply entered a room. Hunger wasn't the worst pain inside me. So I sat down again. I closed my eyes. For almost an hour, I tried to return. A dream inside another dream. When sleep finally took me, the house did not slowly build itself around me. It was already there. Waiting, dark, silent, wrong, I knew I was dreaming. I also knew this was our house, but I had never seen it like this. The kitchen was black. Normally it was bright and warm. I could usually smell whatever Olivia was cooking. Now it felt empty. Dead Olivia? No answer. Billy? Nothing. The silence pressed against my ears. Then I heard a squeak. Something moved in the living room. Wood scraped against wood. Slowly, a chair slid into view. No one was touching it. It moved inch by inch until it stopped in the doorway between the living room and the kitchen. The lights suddenly turned on. Something small jumped from behind the chair. It came straight toward my face. I only recognized Billy because white flowers still covered parts of her body. I threw myself sideways. I hit the floor. Small limbs scratched across the wood behind me. I pushed myself up. Billy had stopped in the doorway. Except she wasn't Billy anymore. She crouched on too many legs. Her body bent in places where a human body shouldn't bend. The flowers across her skin started to wilt. One fell, then another. Then all of them dropped at once. A deep growl came from her chest. Without the flowers, I could see her face clearly. It hung loose, pale, soft, like wet clay sliding from bone. But somewhere inside that horrible shape, I could still see the little girl I had wanted to bring home. For 1 second, I almost walked toward her. I almost opened my arms. Then she moved. I ran. Her uneven footsteps followed me. I raced upstairs. While climbing, I tried to take control. I imagined sunlight. Nothing. I imagined Billy's colorful bedroom. Nothing. I imagined Olivia laughing downstairs. The house refused. Come on. I reached my bedroom. I slammed the door. The walls shook. Something hit the other side. Crack, the sound was deep. hard, like bone smashing into wood. I pressed my back against the door. Another crack. Then another. A strange hissing noise came from underneath. I looked down. Thin black veins began sliding through the gap under the door. They moved like living threads. I stumbled backward. Too late. They wrapped around my ankles. Then they pierced my skin. Pain exploded through my legs. It felt like hundreds of hooked needles pushing into my muscles. I screamed. I tried kicking them away. They only tightened. They pulled. I slid toward the door. More veins stabbed into my legs. I tried to wake myself. Nothing happened. The pain felt completely real. I reached down to tear the veins loose. Several wrapped around my hands. They stabbed through my fingers, my wrists, my palms. Blood spread across the wooden floor. I looked up through tears. The door was gone. The veins were gone. Olivia stood in front of me. Asher? She wore her nightgown. A lamp behind her created a soft line of light around her body. She looked terrified. I miss you, Asher. I tried to move toward her. Help me. Something exploded from the darkness beside her. It hit Olivia and dragged her away. She disappeared from view. Then I heard tearing. Wet, heavy, Olivia screamed. Again, each scream ended with another ripping sound. I stumbled backward. My legs moved before my thoughts could catch up. My back hit the window. I ripped the curtain away. I opened the window and prepared to jump. There was no yard, no trees, no hills. The window opened into another room. An enormous room stretched outside. It seemed larger than the entire house. There was no sun, no sky, only cold, pale light. Then Olivia stopped screaming. The silence forced me to turn around. Something landed heavily on the floor. Olivia, her body lay in a growing pool of blood. One eye stared directly at me. Olivia, her skull cracked open vertically. Black veins exploded from inside her head. They rushed toward me. They wrapped around my arms and legs. Then they pulled. I fell onto my stomach. I dug my fingernails into the floor. The veins pulled harder. They sank deeper into my skin. The hissing sound became deafening. I was dragged toward Olivia's open head. The black threads moved inside the split in her skull. A dark hole waited between them. A thought entered my mind. Would she ask me why I came back for her? Why I kept choosing Olivia? Why I had never gone through the door to the child waiting one room away? Then Olivia's skull snapped shut around my body. The pressure crushed my waist. My back bent. Something broke. Everything turned white. I woke screaming. I ripped the blanket from my body. I expected blood. There was none. My legs were pale, dry, uninjured, still. They burned. For several minutes, I just stared at them. Slowly, the pain faded. I turned toward the nightstand. Anger suddenly took control. I swept my arm across it. Everything crashed onto the floor. The picture frame shattered. I cursed. Then I looked down. Olivia's photograph lay under broken glass. She was smiling. Broken pieces covered her eyes. Hopelessness filled me. I wanted something that begging could never return. I felt lost, angry, and I hated it. After that, I stopped sleeping, or at least I tried. Every night, I sat at my desk and watched the clock. The closer it got to midnight, the more frightened I became. I ate just enough to keep myself standing. Food had no taste. Bread tasted like paper. Meat felt like wet grass in my mouth. Eventually, I forced myself outside. The sunlight felt strange. The sky looked too large. I had become so used to walls and ceilings that standing underneath an open sky made me uncomfortable. I went to the grocery store. I pretended to be normal. People walked past me without knowing anything. They would forget my face before they reached their cars. A woman with curly black hair and glasses almost bumped into me near the cereal aisle. For one horrible second, I thought she was Olivia. My heart jumped. Then I saw her face, a stranger. "Sorry," I whispered. I left the store. Being awake wasn't what hurt. It was everything that was missing. Empty rooms, empty chairs, empty sides of beds, empty spaces where people should have been. I was exhausted. Sometimes, if I didn't blink for too long, the dry air made my eyes burn. Other times, I found myself sitting inside my car. There was one place I visited again and again, an empty piece of land surrounded by trees. That was where the house should have been. Our house. The one we had planned. The one Billy had drawn. Rain tapped against the windshield. I held a small wooden music box in my hands. Inside, the tiny metal cylinder rested beneath the comb. I turned the crank. A few soft notes played. Then I closed the lid. I read the inscription again. My head rested against the seat. Olivia's smell had faded from the car. Now it only smelled like me. Some of her belongings were still inside. They gathered dust. I looked up. Something white floated through the rain. It landed on my windshield, a feather. I leaned closer. A single white feather rested against the glass. I looked toward the clouds. There were no birds. Nothing but gray sky. I sat back. I started the engine. The air conditioning blew against my face. Then I shifted into drive. My foot froze on the brake. The empty land was no longer empty. The house stood between the trees. 2 stories, tall windows, crooked, pointed roof. Exactly as it appeared in my dreams. The house we never got to build. I opened the car door. I stepped onto the gravel. The house vanished. I stood in the rain. Nothing remained. I rubbed my eyes. I looked again. Empty land, only a dream. I became sick of everything. The hunger, the grief, the lack of sleep. I couldn't even watch television anymore. Images moved across the screen, but I felt separated from them. Then I began seeing things. Movement in corners. Curly black hair disappearing through doorways. A hand reaching for mine. I blamed sleep deprivation. Until something hugged me. It happened in my kitchen. 2 arms wrapped around me from behind. I froze. I knew it was Olivia. I knew from the warmth, the smell, the way my body instantly wanted to fall backward into her. I was on the phone with my mother at the time. She had been trying to convince me to leave the apartment. "Asher?" Her voice came through the phone. I couldn't answer. The invisible arms held me. "Asher? Are you there?" Her voice pulled me back. I turned. Nothing, no Olivia. No arms, no body. The kitchen was empty. I don't cry often. Even after Olivia died, I dealt with it by shutting myself away. But when I realized I couldn't kiss my wife, couldn't touch her, couldn't even see her, something broke. I hung up. Then I collapsed in the kitchen and cried. That night, I finally slept. I needed sleep badly. I just didn't need the dream that followed. Usually, if I wanted to see Olivia and Billy, I had to prepare. Quiet room, closed eyes, repeated words. I had to build the house. This time, I opened my eyes and found myself sitting in a hospital chair. Immediately, I knew. This wasn't the house. This was memory. Olivia lay in the hospital bed. Sunset glowed through the window. She looked weak, but when she turned toward me, her eyes were full of love. Her smile was tired, still hers. For a moment, it felt like nothing bad had happened yet. A doctor stood near the door. "You need to stop pushing yourself, Mrs. Williams," he said. "Your body is already fighting hard enough. If you fall in the hallway and nobody sees you, we might not reach you in time." Olivia smiled. "I know." The doctor looked serious. "I mean it. I'm trying to behave," Olivia said. "I'm just not very good at sitting still." The doctor left. A few minutes later, Olivia picked something up from the bed. She held it toward me, a white feather. "It floated past the window," she said. "I thought maybe she could have a little piece of outside." I smiled. "You're smuggling weather now?" Olivia laughed weakly. I took the feather. "Bring it to her?" Olivia asked. "Tell her I'm still looking out the window with her." "I will." I stood. "Her room is going to run out of space for all the stuff you keep giving her." Olivia smiled. Then she turned toward the window again. I entered the hallway. The hospital smelled sterile. Cold, colorful paintings hung along the corridor, trying and failing to make the place seem friendly. I walked until I reached room 28. Children's drawings covered the door. Birds, flowers, bright colors. I stopped. Then I entered. Billy lay in bed. Every time I entered her room, my heart sank. Still, Billy tried to smile when she saw me. She always tried. Christy, the hospital sitter assigned to stay with Billy because nobody else was there, was asleep in the corner. Her chin rested against her chest. I quietly walked past her. I knelt beside Billy's bed. Then I held up the feather. Billy gasped. Her entire face changed. For a second, the sick little girl disappeared, and I saw only excitement. She had once told Olivia she wanted to play with the birds outside her window. Olivia had remembered. Billy carefully touched the feather. Her fingers moved across it as if she were holding treasure. Then she reached beneath her blanket. She pulled out a piece of paper. She handed it to me. Crayon covered most of it. A house. A crooked little house with a purple roof curved like a witch's hat. 3 stick figures stood beside it. I stared. "Can you build this for me?" Billy asked softly. I looked at her. Her eyes seemed more tired every day. No parents visited. No relatives called. Somehow, during all that loneliness, Billy had become ours. "Yeah," I whispered. "Yeah, Billy, I can build it." I held out my hand, but my prices are terrible. $5. Billy laughed. Christy made a sleepy sound from the corner. I pretended to be offended. Billy laughed harder. I stood. Then I felt a small hand grip my shirt. I looked down. Billy stared at me. "When will Olivia come visit?" My smile faded. She wanted Olivia more than anything. I knelt again. "Soon, buddy. Promise?" "She wants to. She asks about you every day." "Is her head still hurting?" I looked down. Yeah, I didn't know what else to say. I touched the drawing. "You sure about the purple roof?" Billy smiled. When I returned to Olivia's room, she looked at me. She loved it, didn't she? I nodded. Olivia already knew. I approached the bed. She reached for my hand. "Asher?" I looked at her. "When we get out of here, I want Billy to be part of our family." Warmth spread through my chest. I smiled. I think she already asked us. I handed Olivia the drawing. 3 people. 1 house. A family Billy had drawn before we were ever officially allowed to become one. I reached toward Olivia. The bed was empty. I stopped. The sheets were pulled aside. Darkness filled the room. Only moonlight came through the window. Olivia? No answer. I rushed into the hallway. Most of the lights were off. Olivia. My voice echoed. Help. Nobody came. No. Anger mixed with panic. Nobody was doing their job. Again, the doctor's warning returned. If she fell somewhere alone, they might not find her in time. I ran. At the end of the hallway, I saw a light around a corner. I followed it. Then I stopped. A woman lay on the floor. Olivia. I ran toward her. The nightmare we had feared for weeks had finally happened. Help, I screamed. No one answered. I lifted Olivia's head. Her body felt heavy, too still. The only breathing in the hallway was mine. Her hand opened. A white lily rested in her palm. I stared at it. Then I looked up. Room 28. Billy was sleeping on the other side of the door. Through the small opening, I could see her in bed. She slept peacefully. My screams didn't wake her, and I felt anger. I hate admitting that. I wasn't angry at Billy. I could never have been angry at her. But grief doesn't always care where it lands. Olivia was dead. Billy was alive. One door stood between me and the child I had almost promised to love forever, and instead of opening that door, I stayed with Olivia. Don't leave her too. My body froze. Olivia had spoken. I looked down. Black veins pushed through the pores of her face. Please, Asher, her eyes opened. It hurts. I woke. My cheeks were wet with dried tears. I never wanted to remember that day. Memory hurt badly enough to feel like another living thing inside me. Then a picture appeared in my mind. White paper, crayon, purple roof, 3 stick figures. Billy had expected us to become her family. And after Olivia died, I left. I walked out of the hospital. I left Billy behind. She woke up without either of the 2 people who had made her believe she might finally have a home. I turned toward Olivia's picture beside my bed. I picked it up. Her quiet smile stared back. I wished it would move. I wished she would speak. Just one more time. She would tell me everything would be okay. She would tell me she still loved me. I closed my eyes. Then I went back into the nightmare. This time, when the dream formed, I stood inside our bedroom. But the house was destroyed. Rust covered the walls. Wallpaper hung in torn strips. Black lines spread through the floor. White feathers and lilies covered everything like dirty snow. Outside, gray clouds filled the sky. Feathers fell continuously. Furniture had half melted. The bedroom door stood open. But there was no hallway beyond it, only a huge dark chamber. I stepped through. Several corridors stretched away from the chamber. Everyone disappeared into darkness. The silence was so deep that even my breathing sounded strange. The air smelled like rot, burned flesh. I wanted to turn back. Instead, I entered the maze. I had spent months lost inside myself. Now I needed to find a way out. Then I heard it. Beep. The sound came from one corridor. A hospital monitor. Olivia's hospital monitor. Somewhere ahead, green light pulsed. I followed it. A figure stepped from the darkness. I stopped. It was nearly skeletal. Long white hands covered its face. Green light leaked through its fingers. Its legs were red and thin. They shook as it stood. It looked like guilt had somehow been given a body. The monitor continued. Beep, the creature didn't attack. It didn't scream. It simply waited. I closed my eyes. Memories came. She's such a sweetie, isn't she? Olivia's voice, curly hair, her glasses catching sunlight, her hand holding mine. Then another memory. Asher? Can you ask them to turn that monitor off? I can't hear myself think. Then another. Asher, please stop turning it off. Then, Asher, I'm scared. I opened my eyes. The pale creature had turned away. It walked toward one corridor, then stopped. Waiting, the beeping continued from that direction. I hated the creature, not because it threatened me, because it knew the way. I followed. It moved slowly. The chamber behind us disappeared. Darkness swallowed everything. Beep, I saw only flashes of the creature's pale skin. Green light pulsed beneath its hands. The hospital monitor guided me deeper into the maze. No matter how long we walked, the creature stayed the same distance ahead. Then I saw light. A thin line at the end of the corridor. Rust and mold covered the walls. The creature dragged its legs through feathers and petals. Then I noticed something. Black veins were attached to its legs. Hundreds of them. Thin as hair. Each step tore some loose. They snapped and curled behind it. The creature fell. I stopped. It didn't ask for help. It began crawling. Slowly, painfully, it continued around the final corner. The air changed. Rust began falling from the walls. Old feathers lifted from the floor. Then I heard something behind us. A deep, wet breath. I froze. Something slammed against the ground. Then it started moving toward us. Fast, I ran. The creature crawled into a larger room. I followed. At the center stood a mountain of black veins. They twisted together, moved, breathed. Every strand seemed connected to one wire buried deep inside the living mass. The pale creature reached the bottom. The veins began pulling it inside. Beep! I looked up. Far above us, a strange light spun in the darkness. Olivia hung in the center of it. A wire disappeared into the shadows around her body. Olivia, her name left my mouth before I could stop it. The creature at my feet became still. Without the monitor sound, without the green light, it didn't look as frightening anymore. It looked tired. Then, thump, I turned. Something crouched in the doorway. Billy, or what grief had turned Billy into. She was much larger now, too large to fit through the doorway properly. Her jaw hung low. Dead lilies filled her mouth. Her pale eyes stared upward toward Olivia. I climbed onto the mountain. The veins moved beneath my hands. Billy's twisted form followed. Her huge jaw scraped along the ground. I climbed faster. Then something grabbed my ankle. I looked down. The pale creature had reached for me. Its face tilted upward. There was no nose. Where its eyes should have been was one long wound. Beep! Green light pulsed beneath its skin. Billy came closer. I looked at the pale creature. Maybe I helped because it was suffering. Maybe because it had followed Olivia's monitor just like I had. Maybe because I finally understood what it was. It was me. The part of me still crawling toward the past. I grabbed it. I pulled it free of the veins. Then I carried it. The climb became worse. Black strands pushed into my legs, my stomach, my arms. I held the pale body above me. I kept moving. Olivia was only a few feet away. Asher? I froze. Don't leave me here, too. The voice did not come from Olivia. It came from below. Billy stood at the bottom of the mountain. Flowers grew from her destroyed mouth. She looked at me. Billy flashed through my mind. Small fingers holding a feather. Green eyes staring from a hospital bed. A girl waiting behind a door. A child with nobody. A child who had almost become my daughter. I won't, I said. The words hurt. I should have said them years ago. For the first time, I understood that I wasn't talking to the monster. I was talking to Billy, the real Billy, the child I had abandoned. I reached Olivia. I wrapped my arms around her. Her body felt weak. Light. Every year we should have had together rushed through my mind. Every morning, every argument, every birthday, every ordinary night. Olivia, I whispered. I'm sorry. I held her tighter. I'm sorry I kept bringing you back to the place where you were still suffering. My voice shook. I told myself it was love. I cried. But I think I was just afraid to lose you. The pale creature lay beside us. Black veins moved through its body. One thin arm reached toward the wire inside the mountain. The hospital monitor came from the wire now. Beep. It was the sound trapping Olivia inside the worst moment of our lives. I placed my hand over the creature's. I looked down one last time. Billy stared up at me. Olivia wasn't trapped inside the wire. Billy wasn't truly the monster below. These were things grief had built. Things I had built. They were waiting for me to do what I had been too afraid to do. I'm sorry, I whispered. I didn't know if I was speaking to Olivia, Billy, or myself. I'm coming back now. Then I pulled the wire and chose the door I had refused to open. That brings me to now. I'm writing this because I need to remember what grief almost did to me. Grief can make a locked room feel safer than an open door. It can make pain feel like love. It can make the dead feel closer than the living. It can convince you that refusing to move forward is the same thing as remembering. I'm trying to choose the door now, the real one, the one that leads forward. Before I finish the roof on our new house, I need to choose where the garden will go. The curved part of the roof is still giving me trouble. Billy keeps reminding me that it has to look exactly like the drawing. Purple roof, pointed top, like a witch's hat. I told her she has terrible taste. She told me I promised. She was right. There's a spot behind the house that gets sunlight most of the day. I think that's where I'll plant the lilies. Olivia's photograph will look good there. I think she would like that. From wherever she is, maybe she'll be able to see Billy come home from her first day of school. Yes, Billy, my daughter. I hear her calling me now. I made her a hairpin yesterday, a tiny white feather. Your feather, Olivia, she loves it. A few minutes ago, I looked up from writing this and saw Billy standing near the window. Sunlight fell across her shoulders. For a second, it looked like someone had placed a warm hand there. She was holding the little wooden music box. She turned the crank. A soft melody filled the room. I smiled. Then I stopped. I couldn't remember giving the music box to her. I don't know where she found it. Billy looked at me. For 1 second, my heart tightened. I thought I saw something white in her hair. A flower. But when she turned, there was only the feather hairpin. She smiled. Dad? Yeah? Are you coming? I looked around our house. The real house. Not the one from the dreams. There were tools on the floor. Boxes waiting to be unpacked. The roof wasn't finished. The garden hadn't been planted. There were dishes in the sink. There was laundry waiting upstairs. Normal problems. Beautiful problems. I looked at the doorway. Billy waited on the other side. For the first time in a very long time, I didn't close my eyes and search for Olivia. I stood up. I'm coming. Billy ran ahead of me. The music box continued playing behind us. Its little melody became quieter as we walked farther away. For once, it did not sound like something asking me to turn around. It didn't sound like the hospital monitor. It didn't sound like a warning. It didn't sound like grief. It was only music, and I let it stay behind me. Story 2. 3 years ago, on Christmas morning, my parents gave me a GoPro. At the time, I thought it was the coolest gift I had ever received. I was still in high school, had too much free time, and believed every stupid thing I did with my friends deserved to be recorded. For the first couple of weeks, I mounted the camera to my bike helmet and filmed myself riding around the local park. I recorded small jumps, tricks, wipeouts, races with my brother, and anything else I thought might look impressive on video. Then I would upload the clips to YouTube. Most of them barely got 10 views. And I knew exactly who those 10 people were. My brother watched them. A few cousins watched them. Maybe 2 or 3 friends clicked on them because I kept sending them links. Once in a while, some random person left a comment, and I would act like I had become famous. It was stupid, but I loved it. Then my best friend, Jack, showed me something that changed everything. Jack came over one afternoon with his phone already in his hand. "You've got to see this," he said. He showed me a video of 2 guys walking through an abandoned hospital. They had flashlights, backpacks, masks, and small cameras strapped to their bodies. The hallways were covered in graffiti. Old hospital beds had been left behind. Doors opened into rooms full of broken equipment. The whole building looked like everyone had suddenly disappeared one day and never returned. I watched the entire video. Then another. Then another. Urban exploration. I had never really known there was a name for it before. People would find abandoned schools, factories, houses, hotels, churches, hospitals, tunnels, and old government buildings, then explore them while filming everything. I was immediately interested. Compared with recording myself falling off a bike, it looked incredible. Jack felt the same way. Within a month, we had started doing it ourselves. At first, the places were small, an abandoned house outside town, an old warehouse near the highway, a closed restaurant that still had plates sitting in the kitchen. Then 2 other friends joined us. We created a shared YouTube channel. Nobody expected much. For the first year, we barely had any subscribers. Then one of our videos inside an abandoned factory got picked up by the algorithm. That video reached more than 100,000 views. After that, everything changed. People subscribed. They started suggesting locations. Local people sent us messages about abandoned buildings we had never heard of. We improved our equipment. Better cameras, better flashlights, protective masks, gloves, boots, portable batteries. Eventually, exploring abandoned places became something we did almost every weekend. 3 years after getting that GoPro for Christmas, our channel had more than 100,000 subscribers. We had explored places all over the state. The farthest trip we ever made was almost 7 hours away, where we found an abandoned mansion that looked like a small castle. The roof had partly collapsed, but stone towers still stood over the property. That became one of our most popular videos. Things had been going great. Then Jack decided we should explore the abandoned church downtown. That church was different. Everyone in town knew about it. It had been closed for years. Nobody seemed to know exactly why. Depending on who you asked, you got a different story. Some people said there had been financial problems. Others claimed the building was unsafe. One rumor said someone had died inside. Another said several priests had suddenly left town. There were even stories about strange meetings being held there at night. I never believed most of it, but I also didn't want to go inside. I had been raised Catholic. So had Jack. Something about breaking into an abandoned church felt different from walking through an old factory or empty house. It felt wrong. One Saturday morning, I woke up late with my head pounding from a party the previous night. My mouth tasted terrible, and sunlight coming through my bedroom window felt painfully bright. I checked my phone. My mother had texted to tell me she and my dad were going to visit my aunt. My brother had already gone to work. I was alone. I dragged myself into the kitchen, opened a cabinet, grabbed a box of cereal, and started eating it dry. I couldn't be bothered getting a bowl. My phone buzzed. "Jack, we should explore the church downtown." I stared at the message. Then typed, "No." I was raised Catholic. His reply came almost immediately. So was I. Can be a first for the channel. No. I put my phone down. A few seconds later, I saw the little speech bubble appear. Then disappear. Appear again. Disappear. Finally, another message arrived. "Pussy," I tossed the phone onto the counter. "Asshole," I opened the refrigerator, grabbed the milk, and drank directly from the gallon. My phone buzzed again. "You're not a pussy, but come on, man," I sighed. "That church closed 'cause of some weird shit. Rumors, bro. Let's go to the mayor and ask him himself." I stared at the screen. The mayor? Jack was seriously suggesting we go into City Hall and ask the mayor why an abandoned church had closed. All of this for a YouTube video. "Jack, fuck off. Dude, he isn't doing anything anyway. Let's go and ask." I started typing a long message explaining exactly how stupid his idea was. Then I stopped. The easiest way to end this argument was probably to prove there was nothing mysterious about the church. Fine. Be here by 11. I'll drive us. Jack arrived at exactly 11. That alone should have warned me something strange was happening, because Jack had never been on time for anything in his life. We drove to City Hall. Our town wasn't very big, so getting inside wasn't difficult. We went to the front desk and asked whether we could speak with the mayor. The woman behind the desk gave us a strange look. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Jack said. She looked at us again. "What's this about?" "Local history," Jack said. That wasn't technically a lie. She made a phone call. Then she told us the mayor would be available around noon. We sat in the waiting area. Jack leaned back in his chair. Small town perks, I guess. I looked at him. What? What mayor in some huge city would make time for two idiots like us? I shook my head. All of this for a fucking video. He smiled. "You'll thank me when it gets 1,000,000 views. Or we'll get arrested. That gets views too." 40 minutes later, we were called into the mayor's office. The mayor was a middle-aged man I had seen plenty of times around town. He attended local events. He appeared in newspapers. He gave speeches during festivals. He had one of those friendly political faces that always looked prepared for a photograph. He stood and shook our hands. "Gentlemen, we thanked him for meeting with us." He smiled. "Oh, of course I can make time for two local internet celebrities." Jack looked proud. I wanted to disappear. The mayor sat behind his desk. "What can I help you with?" Jack suddenly looked at me. I stared back. This had been his idea, yet now he wanted me to do the talking. I rolled my eyes. "Well, sir, we wanted to ask about the old church downtown." The mayor's smile changed slightly. "Which church?" He knew exactly which one. The abandoned one. He leaned back. "What about it? Why did it close?" The mayor laughed. He folded his hands together and slowly moved his thumbs around each other. "I'm sure you boys have heard plenty of rumors." Jack nodded. "Some, well, unfortunately, the real answer isn't exciting. There were permit problems. A few documents expired, inspections weren't completed, and eventually the property was closed. I looked at Jack. There, answer. We could leave. Instead, Jack leaned forward. Come on. The mayor's smile disappeared. Jack continued. We're not little kids. Permits? Really? The mayor stared at him. Yeah, really the room suddenly felt much less friendly. Is that all you wanted? Jack looked at me. Then, back at him. Yeah, the mayor gave us a long lecture after that. He explained that the building was private property. He warned us about trespassing. He said abandoned buildings were dangerous. Weak floors, broken glass, unstable ceilings. Then he said something that stayed with me. Whatever you've heard about that place, stay away from it. His voice was different when he said it, not angry, not official, almost nervous. Jack noticed it too. We left. Outside City Hall, I looked at him. Well, Jack smiled. We're going. What? You heard him. He literally told us not to. Exactly, I hated admitting it, but now I was curious too. If it was really just about expired permits, why had his entire attitude changed the moment Jack questioned him? The mayor had gone from joking about us being local celebrities to almost throwing us out of the building. The more I thought about it, the stranger it seemed. By the time we got home, my original fear had started turning into excitement. The church was abandoned. We had explored abandoned buildings before. We had safety equipment. We didn't steal things. We didn't spray graffiti. We didn't destroy property. We filmed, looked around, and left. Who were we really hurting? That became my excuse. The next weekend, Jack decided Sunday morning would be perfect. When I say Sunday morning, I mean midnight. Our other two friends refused. One said he had plans. The other simply said he wanted nothing to do with that church. I called them both cowards. Now I wish I had listened. Jack and I met outside the church at midnight. The building looked worse at night. It was large, old, and made of dark stone. A tall bell tower rose over the roof. Several stained glass windows were broken. Weeds had grown through cracks in the steps. The front doors were chained shut. I switched on my GoPro. Jack had another camera. We filmed the outside first. Then we walked around the building. One window near the side had already been smashed. Most of the glass was gone, but sharp pieces still stuck out around the frame. We carefully broke away some loose pieces so we wouldn't cut ourselves. Then Jack climbed through. I followed. The drop was only a few feet. My boots hit the dusty floor. I stood and turned on my flashlight. The church was destroyed inside. Rows of pews had been broken. Some had been flipped over. Statues of saints lay smashed across the floor. One statue had lost its head. Pages from Bibles covered the aisles. Some had been ripped apart. Others were stained with dirt and water. I whispered, "This place is fucked." Jack's voice came from behind me. "Good thumbnail." I almost laughed. Then I noticed something. Light. At the far end of the church, near the altar, there was a faint red glow. I lowered my flashlight. "Jack, I see it. We should have left." Instead, we moved deeper inside. Our boots made soft, crunching sounds over broken glass and plaster. As we got closer, shapes appeared near the altar. People, 10 of them. They wore long brown robes. My first thought was that we had found homeless people. Then I noticed how they were standing, perfectly still, facing the altar. This wasn't random. This was organized. Jack stopped beside me. "What the fuck?" One figure stood at the front. His robe was red. He turned. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then his voice exploded through the church. Intruders. The word echoed off the high ceiling. I grabbed Jack's arm. Run! But he froze. Two robed figures charged toward us. I barely had time to move before one slammed into me. I hit the floor hard. My GoPro struck my chest. A man landed on top of me. His rough brown robe scratched against my face and hands as I struggled. I tried punching him. Another blow hit me from the side. Then another. Someone punched my ribs. Someone hit my face. I heard Jack shouting. Then something struck me near the temple. My vision blurred. The ceiling seemed to spin above me. I stopped fighting. The man in the red robe approached. Now that he was closer, I could see that he was older. Maybe 50, maybe 60. His face was narrow. His eyes looked completely calm. That frightened me more than anger would have. He looked down at the GoPro mounted on my chest, then reached down and ripped it off. No, he threw it onto the floor, then crushed it beneath his boot. Plastic cracked. The camera broke apart. My 3-year-old Christmas present was destroyed in 1 second. But I barely cared. I looked toward Jack. He was lying several feet away. His eyes were closed. Blood ran from his nose. The men lifted us. They dragged us behind the altar and toward a narrow staircase. We were carried downstairs. The basement smelled damp. Old stone walls surrounded us. A few weak lights hung from the ceiling. There were wooden cabinets along one side. Strange symbols had been painted onto the floor. The men threw us down. I hit the concrete. My head was still spinning. The red-robed leader came downstairs. The others followed. Then he pointed toward one of the brown-robed men. Come forward. The man hesitated. Then obeyed. The leader grabbed his robe and pulled it away. I saw the man's face. My stomach dropped. It was the mayor. His upper body was bare. On his right arm was a tattoo. An eye inside a pentagram. A sword passed through the center. I stared at him. Mayor? My voice barely worked. The red-robed man stepped forward and slapped me. Pain exploded across my cheek. Silence, he turned toward the mayor. Your indiscretion will be costly. The mayor looked terrified. The leader continued. You told us these two visited your office and asked about this church. The mayor nodded. You assured us you had discouraged them. Another nod. You said your warning was effective. Tears began running down the mayor's face. Yes, clearly, you overstated yourself. The leader snapped his fingers. One of the robed men walked toward a cabinet. He opened it, then removed something. A wooden handle with short metal chains attached to it. Sharp pieces of steel hung from the ends. My stomach turned. The leader took it. The mayor dropped to his knees. The members of the group of the Holy Sword, the leader said, have dedicated our lives to fighting the corruption destroying this country. His voice filled the basement. Free will has allowed Satan to poison our people. Our children are taught weakness. Sin is celebrated. Filth is treated as virtue. Everything sacred is mocked, while everything disgusting is protected. I looked at Jack. His eyes were open now. He was listening. The man continued speaking. I barely understood half of it. He talked about purity. Punishment, politics, religion, society. He sounded like someone who had spent so many years listening to his own anger that it had become his entire personality. Then I realized what we had walked into. A cult. A real one. And the mayor belonged to it. The leader looked down at him. Self-punishment is not enough for this failure, Mr. Mayor. He raised the metal weapon. then brought it down. The chain struck the mare's back. He screamed. Blood appeared immediately. I turned my face away. Another strike came. Then another. The sound was horrible. Metal hitting flesh. The mare cried out. On the fourth strike, part of the chain caught in his back. The leader pulled. The mare screamed louder. Then, suddenly went silent. His body collapsed. He had passed out. The leader dropped the weapon. 2 members picked the mare up and carried him away. The red-robed man turned his back to us. That was when Jack looked at me. He winked. I knew Jack well enough to understand exactly what that meant. Before I could stop him, he jumped up. He punched the man guarding him. The guy fell backward. I pushed the other one away. Go. We ran. I hit the stairs first. Jack was right behind me. People shouted below us. We reached the main church. I heard someone coming after us. I made the mistake of looking back. The red-robed leader had pulled out a handgun. "Run all you want," he screamed. We ran faster. "We know you." The first shot exploded through the church. The noise was deafening. The bullet passed somewhere above us. My ears started ringing. "We know your families." Another shot. "You made a mistake coming here." We reached the center aisle. The broken window seemed impossibly far away. The leader kept shouting, "We have people everywhere." Another gunshot. "We've grown into your local politics." I heard Jack breathing hard behind me. "We will continue to grow." The next shot sounded different, not because the gun had changed, because Jack stopped running. I heard him fall. I turned. He hit the floor face first. Jack. Blood was spreading across the back of his shirt. For 1 second, I almost ran toward him. Then another bullet struck a pew beside me. Wood exploded. I ran. I hated myself for it. I still hate myself. I reached the broken window. I climbed onto the frame. Glass cut through my glove. I threw myself outside. I hit the ground hard. Then I got up and ran into the night. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I had to put distance between myself and that building. Behind me, I heard the church door opening, voices, men shouting. I turned down an alley, then another. My lungs burned. My face hurt from the beating. Blood from the cut on my hand soaked through my glove. I pulled out my phone. My fingers shook so badly I nearly dropped it. I called 911. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The operator kept asking what my emergency was. Finally, I managed to say there had been a shooting at the abandoned church. I told her my friend had been shot. I told her armed people were inside. Then I realized something. The mayor. The police might know him. How many other people knew? The leader had shouted that they had grown into local politics. What if that was true? I ended the call. That may sound insane. Maybe it was. But after seeing the mayor kneeling in that basement wearing their symbol, I didn't know who I could trust. I kept running until I reached a 24-hour gas station several blocks away. I went inside. The cashier stared at me. I must have looked terrible. Blood on my face, a torn glove, dirt covering my clothes. I asked if I could stay inside. Then I called my parents. They didn't answer the first time. I called again. My mother picked up. I told her to wake Dad. I told her they needed to leave the house. Immediately, she kept asking what happened. I refused to explain over the phone. I only told her to take my brother and go to my aunt's house. Then I called the police again. This time I gave them everything. The church, the basement, the mayor, the cult, the shooting. The officer who arrived first looked like he thought I was high. Then he saw my injuries. An ambulance came. Police went to the church. By sunrise, the entire area was surrounded. But Jack was gone. The blood was there. His camera was there. My broken GoPro was there. But his body had disappeared. So had the people in robes. The basement had been cleaned. The cabinets were empty. The symbols had been scrubbed from the floor. The mayor was nowhere to be found. Police eventually announced that he had left town unexpectedly. His office claimed there had been a family emergency. A few days later, a statement appeared saying he had resigned for personal reasons. Nobody mentioned the church. Nobody mentioned Jack. His disappearance became a missing person case. I told investigators everything. Some believed me. Others clearly didn't. They asked whether Jack and I had been drinking. They asked about drugs. They asked whether we had enemies. They asked whether Jack could have staged something for views. I showed them our messages. I showed them where we had met. I showed them the video file saved from before my GoPro was destroyed. There were a few seconds of footage from inside the church before the camera broke. Dark robes could be seen. The red light could be seen. Voices could be heard. But the footage was blurry. Not enough to identify anyone. Not enough to prove everything. Jack's family blamed me. I don't blame them. I was the one who drove us there. I was the one who agreed to go. I was the one who came back. Our channel exploded afterward. People online became obsessed with Jack's disappearance. Subscribers doubled, then tripled. Videos analyzing our final upload appeared everywhere. Some people thought it was a publicity stunt. Some thought Jack had been murdered. Others believed the cult story. I deleted the channel. I couldn't stand looking at it. Everything we had built suddenly felt disgusting. 100,000 subscribers had once seemed like the biggest achievement of my life. Now I would trade every one of them for 5 minutes with Jack. I moved away from town within a month. My parents did too. My brother changed jobs. We didn't tell many people where we went. I stopped using most social media. I changed my number twice. For a while, nothing happened. Then I began getting emails. No sender name. No subject. Usually only one sentence. We know you. I deleted them. Then another came. We know your family. I contacted the police. They said there wasn't much they could do. The messages didn't contain a direct threat. A few weeks later, I found an envelope under my apartment door. Inside was a photograph. It showed me leaving work. On the back, someone had drawn the same symbol I had seen tattooed on the mayor's arm. An eye. Inside a pentagram. A sword through the center. I moved again. The messages stopped for almost 6 months. Then, last week, I received a package. There was no return address. Inside was a small piece of broken black plastic. I recognized it immediately. Part of my GoPro. The one the red-robed man had crushed beneath his boot 3 years earlier. Underneath it was a memory card. I didn't want to look, but I did. There was one video. The footage began in darkness. Then someone turned on a light. Jack was sitting in a chair. He looked thinner, older but alive. I nearly dropped the laptop. 3 years. For 3 years, I had believed he was dead. Jack looked directly into the camera. There were bruises around his eyes. A familiar symbol had been cut or tattooed into his chest. Someone behind the camera spoke. tell him. Jack swallowed, then whispered my name. I moved closer to the screen. "I'm sorry," he said. Someone off camera asked, "For what?" Jack closed his eyes, then opened them again, "For bringing him there." "No," I whispered the word at my laptop. Jack continued. "They said I have to make things right. A red sleeve entered the edge of the frame. The same color robe. The leader." I couldn't see his face. Jack looked terrified. Then he said something that has kept me awake every night since. "They know where you are." The video ended. I called the police. Again, I gave them the package. Again, I explained everything. Again, they took it seriously this time. At least, I think they did. But there is one thing I haven't told them, because I don't know who I can trust anymore. Yesterday, I went online and searched the name of the officer handling my case. I found a picture from a charity event held 2 years ago. He was standing beside several local officials. His sleeves were rolled up. There was something on the inside of his right arm. The image was blurry. I zoomed in. An eye, a pentagram, and a sword. So now I'm packing. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know whether Jack is still alive. I don't know how many people belong to the group of the Holy Sword. I don't know whether the mayor was punished because he failed to stop us, or whether his disappearance was planned. I don't know how far this thing reaches. All I know is that Jack was right about one thing. Going into that church was a first for our channel. It was also the last video we ever made. 3 years ago, I thought the worst possible outcome of urban exploration was getting arrested, falling through a rotten floor, stepping on a rusty nail, or getting chased by a security guard. I was wrong. Sometimes an abandoned building is abandoned because nobody wants it anymore. Sometimes it's abandoned because the roof is collapsing. Sometimes it's abandoned because the owner ran out of money. And sometimes a building only looks abandoned because the people using it don't want anyone to know they're still inside. Jack wanted one good video. I wanted subscribers. We thought we were exploring an empty church. Instead, we walked into something that had been hiding in our town for years. Something the mayor knew about. Something powerful enough to clean up a crime scene before police arrived. Something powerful enough to make a wounded mayor disappear. Something that kept my best friend alive for 3 years. Something that knows where my family lives. Something that apparently has people inside the police department. Before that night, my biggest concern was whether our video would perform well. I worried about titles, thumbnails, views, watch time, subscribers. Now I sleep with a chair against my bedroom door. I check underneath my car before getting inside. I change routes whenever I drive home. I never tell anyone where I'm going, and whenever I see a church, even an ordinary one, filled with families on a Sunday morning, I find myself looking at people's arms, searching for that tattoo, searching for the eye, the pentagram, the sword. I still think about Jack falling in that aisle. I remember hearing the gunshot. I remember seeing the blood. For 3 years, that moment was the last image I had of him. Now I know he survived. And somehow, that is worse. Because death would have meant it ended that night. The video proved it didn't. For him, that night never ended. And now, I don't think it ever ended for me either. My life started over when I climbed out of that broken church window and ran into the darkness. I left behind my best friend, our channel, my hometown, and the person I used to be. all because we wanted to make a fucking video. And if anyone watching one of those urban exploration channels ever decides they want to try it themselves, there is only one thing I would tell them. When locals warn you to stay away from an abandoned place, listen. When a mayor suddenly stops smiling after you ask about a building, stop asking questions. And if you ever walk into a supposedly empty church at midnight and see a red light glowing near the altar, don't keep filming. Don't whisper to your friend. Don't move closer. Turn around. Run, because sometimes the scariest thing waiting inside an abandoned building isn't a ghost. It's people who never abandoned it at all. Story 3. The line between being awake and being asleep has always seemed strange to me. There is that short period when your body feels heavy, your thoughts stop making complete sense, and you are not completely sure whether you are still thinking or already dreaming. Most of the time, we pass through that stage without noticing it. But sometimes something happens during those few minutes that makes you question what was real and what came from your own mind. In my case, it becomes even stranger when I fall asleep during the day. I have never been someone who enjoys taking naps. I prefer sleeping at night, mostly because even a short nap in the afternoon can ruin my sleep schedule. If I accidentally sleep for an hour during the day, I usually spend half the night turning from one side of the bed to the other, staring at the ceiling and wondering why I ever decided to close my eyes earlier. There is another reason I dislike daytime naps. Whenever I sleep during the day, even if it is only for 20 or 30 minutes, I almost always dream. At least, I think they are dreams. They often feel different from the dreams I have at night. Normal dreams usually have some kind of story, no matter how ridiculous it is. I might be somewhere I know, talking to people I recognize, and then suddenly the whole world changes without me questioning it. These daytime experiences are different. They are shorter. Sharper, sometimes they feel like sounds or memories rather than actual dreams. I wake up afterward with the feeling that something happened, but I cannot always tell exactly what it was. It is almost like my brain continues working while my body is resting, creating little pieces of reality and mixing them with whatever is happening around me. Maybe that explains what happened last summer. I would like to believe it does. It was around the middle of summer, during one of those unpleasantly hot periods when every room feels warmer than it should. It had rained hard that morning, and once the clouds cleared, the sun came out and turned all that rain into thick humidity. The air felt heavy. Everything smelled wet. The walls of the house seemed to hold the heat. I cannot remember exactly what I had been doing earlier that day. I think I had been working around the property. There were always small jobs waiting to be done. Maybe I had been fixing something outside or carrying things around the yard. Whatever I had been doing, by early afternoon I was exhausted. Not the normal kind of tired where you know you could sleep if you wanted. This was that sudden, powerful drowsiness where your whole body seems to become heavier every minute. I went upstairs to the bedroom. My wife was away at the time. She had gone on vacation in Europe about a week earlier and still had another 10 days before she was supposed to return. So I had the entire house to myself. Normally, I enjoy having some time alone. That afternoon, I climbed into bed without even changing clothes properly. I lay there with my phone in my hand, scrolling through social media and checking sports websites without really paying attention to anything. My eyes kept closing. I would read half a sentence, realize I had no idea what it said, then scroll farther down. Eventually, I gave up. I put the phone aside. For several minutes, I simply stared at the ceiling. The bedroom was too warm. My pillow was already damp where the back of my neck rested against it. Sweat ran down the side of my face. The room felt almost impossible to breathe in. I remember thinking that I should take a cold shower. That seemed like the perfect solution. Get out of bed, take a quick shower, wake myself up, maybe make some coffee afterward. Simple. I put my hands against the mattress and pushed myself up onto my elbows. My feet were just starting to move toward the edge of the bed when I heard it. The automatic gates opening. My gates. There was absolutely no doubt in my mind about the sound. Anyone who has lived with the same piece of machinery for years knows what I mean. Certain sounds become so familiar that you can recognize them instantly. Our property had large sliding metal gates at the entrance. They had been installed around 15 years earlier. They were not quiet. When the motor started moving them, they made a low mechanical groan, followed by the rough metallic sound of the wheels and gears working together. There was also a little squeak caused by age, a kind of rusty complaint. I had heard that sound thousands of times. I knew exactly how long it lasted. 14 seconds. From completely closed to completely open, the entire cycle took 14 seconds. And there was another detail. Halfway through the opening process, there was always a loud clank. Something in the mechanism had worn down over the years, maybe a damaged tooth on the rack, or a problem with one of the gears. I had never bothered repairing it because the gate still worked perfectly well. But every single time it opened, approximately 7 seconds into the movement, there was a sharp metallic clank. That afternoon, lying half upright in bed, I heard the gates begin moving. I froze. My elbows remained pressed into the mattress. One foot was almost touching the floor. For some reason, I did not immediately get up. Instead, I listened. My brain started counting automatically. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, clank. The sound came exactly when it was supposed to. That little detail was what frightened me. If I had simply heard some distant motor or a neighbor moving something, I could have ignored it. But that clank was ours. I knew it. The sound snapped me out of whatever sleepy state I had been in. I stood up. For a moment, I simply stared toward the bedroom door. What were the gates doing? Nobody should have been opening them. There was only one remote control. Not two. Not a spare hidden somewhere. One, and that remote control was supposed to be hanging downstairs beside the front door. The gates also had a manual release, but using it was not simple. You needed a key. The key was kept inside the house, hanging beside the remote. Even if someone somehow had the key, they would have to open the control housing, disengage the motor, and physically slide the gates by hand. And even then, they would not move at exactly the same speed as the automatic motor. They certainly would not produce the familiar clank at precisely the halfway point. My wife could have opened the gates, of course. But she was in another country. She had been gone for a week. No one else had permission to come onto the property. I stood there trying to create an explanation. Maybe the remote had malfunctioned. Maybe an electrical problem had activated the motor. Maybe somebody nearby used a device operating on a similar frequency. Possible, not likely, but possible. I walked toward the window. I remember doing it on my toes. I have no idea why. There was no reason to be quiet. If someone really had entered the property, I should have wanted them to know somebody was home. But something inside me made me move carefully. Slowly, the bedroom was on the second floor, and from the window I could see the front gate clearly. It was slightly to the left, beyond part of the yard. The sound continued. The hot sweat on the back of my neck suddenly felt cold, not cooler. Cold, a chill ran down my spine. 14 seconds passed. The motor noise stopped. I reached the curtain. For a second, I hesitated. I think part of me expected to see a car driving toward the house, or a stranger standing inside the property. Either would have been frightening, but at least either would have made sense. I carefully pulled the curtain aside. The gates were closed, completely closed. I stared at them. For some strange reason, that frightened me more than seeing them open would have. If they had been open, then something had activated them. Maybe a technical problem, maybe someone had gotten access, maybe the remote was damaged. But they were closed. They looked exactly as they had before I heard anything. I watched for movement. Nothing, no person. No vehicle, no animal. The road beyond the gate was empty. I stood there for several seconds. Then, I let the curtain fall back into place. Absolute nonsense. That was the phrase that entered my mind. Complete nonsense. I was tired, probably half asleep. The heat had made me drowsy. I had almost certainly imagined the sound. Maybe I had actually fallen asleep for a few seconds without realizing it. That happens. People sometimes dream that their alarm rings, then wake up and discover it never did. This was probably something similar. I no longer wanted the cold shower. Strangely, I was not hot anymore. The fear had cooled me better than any shower could have. I walked back toward the bed. This time, I did not bother tiptoeing. I lay down. My head landed on the same damp patch of pillow. I stared at the ceiling again. Ridiculous, I said quietly. I think I was trying to convince myself. For maybe a minute, nothing happened. My heart slowed. The house remained quiet. Then another thought occurred to me. I should check the remote. If it was still hanging beside the front door, then I could at least prove nobody had used it. I should also check the manual release key. Simple. Go downstairs. Look at the hook. Then I could laugh at myself and move on. I put my hands against the mattress. I pushed myself up onto my elbows and froze again. This time the sound was different. It came from directly below me. The garage was on the first floor, almost exactly beneath the bedroom. Inside that garage was my old Smart 42, a lime green Smart 42 450. The engine started. I knew that sound even better than the gates. For anyone who has never driven an older Smart 42 450, the car has a very particular engine noise. Calling it beautiful would be generous. While running, it almost sounds as if someone has switched on a vacuum cleaner beside the engine. There is this strange, constant mechanical whine mixed with the normal motor sound. I had owned that car long enough to know it instantly. I also knew none of my neighbors owned the same model. The sound came directly beneath me. My car was running. I did not count this time. I jumped out of bed. Barefoot, I rushed out of the bedroom and down the stairs. I barely touched the steps. As I passed through the entrance hallway, something caught my eye. The little wall rack beside the door. It was shaped like a tiny village house. Hanging from it were two things, the gate remote and the manual control key, both exactly where they were supposed to be. I did not stop. I ran straight toward the garage. The engine noise was still in my head. I reached the garage door and entered. The tile floor beneath my bare feet was cold, and there was my Smart, lime green. Completely still, completely silent. The letters SMART were visible on the back, arranged under the Mercedes-Benz logo in a way that always made the car look like it was smiling. That stupid little smile seemed especially strange at that moment. I stood there staring at it. The car stared back. Well, obviously, it did not actually stare. But that was how it felt. I walked closer. No engine vibration. No exhaust. No lights. Nothing. I placed a hand against the car. Still cold enough that it clearly had not been running. I looked through the window. The keys were not inside. Of course they weren't. I had left them where I normally kept them. I stepped back. Absolute nonsense. Again, I must have imagined it. There was no other explanation. But the sound had been so clear. I had not heard something vaguely similar to my car. I had heard my car start, the starter turning, the engine catching. Then, that familiar vacuum-like hum. Exactly the same. I stood in the garage for longer than I want to admit. Part of me expected it to start while I was watching. It did not. Eventually, I left. I had no interest in going back upstairs. I did not even want to return to the bedroom to get slippers. There was an old spare pair downstairs, so I put those on. Then, I went into the living room. I switched on the television. I sat in a chair. Whatever channel appeared first stayed on. I could not tell you what program was playing. People were talking. There were commercials. At some point, I think there was a sports broadcast. But I did not absorb any of it. My mind was somewhere else. I kept listening to the house. Every small sound caught my attention. The refrigerator turning on. Pipes moving. A bird landing outside. The television changing volume between a program and an advertisement. Each time, my body tightened. I waited for the gates again, or the car. Nothing happened. Eventually, the afternoon passed. The heat returned. My neck became sweaty again. The strange fear slowly faded. By evening, I was almost embarrassed by how badly it had frightened me. I made dinner. I checked the gates. Locked, I checked the garage. Car untouched. The remote and manual key were still hanging in their normal place. Everything was exactly as it should be. That should have been enough. It wasn't. That night, I had trouble sleeping. Ironically, the daytime nap I had been worried about had never really happened. At least, I do not think it had. I lay awake in the same bed, occasionally glancing toward the window. Every time the house made a noise, I listened. Nothing unusual happened. The next morning, everything still looked normal. Days passed. My wife eventually returned from her vacation. I told her what had happened. She laughed at first. Not cruelly. It did sound ridiculous. You were falling asleep, she said. That was her explanation. Honestly, it was mine too. There is a known state between sleeping and waking where people can hear things that are not actually happening. Voices, music, knocking, sometimes even complete conversations. The brain is beginning to dream while part of you still feels awake. That is probably what happened. Probably, but there are parts of the experience that still bother me. The timing of the gate. That exact 14-second opening cycle. The clank halfway through. If my brain invented it, why was it so precise? Maybe because I had heard it thousands of times. My mind knew the pattern as well as I did. That explanation works. Then there's the car. Maybe once the first strange sound frightened me, my brain remained in that half-dreaming state. I lay down again. I started drifting off. Then I imagined another familiar noise. Again, possible, logical, easy to accept. Except I remember feeling awake. completely awake, especially after the gates. My heart was beating hard. I had already stood up and looked through the window. I had thought through the location of the remote control. I had considered the manual release. I had made decisions. I had returned to bed. Then I heard the car. Could all of that have happened inside a dream? Yes, probably. Dreams can feel extremely real. Maybe I never actually looked through the window the first time. Maybe I dreamed that too. Maybe I only truly woke when I ran downstairs. But then why do I remember the cold floor of the garage so clearly? Why do I remember seeing the remote control and key as I passed through the entrance hall? Why can I still picture the smart sitting there with that stupid little smile? The strange thing is that nothing actually happened. That is what makes the story difficult to explain to people. There was no stranger, no break-in. Nothing went missing. My car did not move. The gates did not open. I did not discover footprints outside. There was no mysterious figure standing in the yard. No camera footage. No evidence. Just two sounds. That is all. Two sounds that should not have existed. Sometimes I think that makes it worse. If I had found something, then I could have investigated it. A faulty motor, a radio signal, an electrical problem, someone messing with me. Anything. Instead, I was left with nothing except my own memory. And memory is unreliable, especially memory from the edge of sleep. A week after it happened, I was still thinking about it. A month later, I occasionally remembered it when I heard the gates opening normally. A year has passed, and I still do not have an answer. Maybe there is no mystery. Maybe my brain simply recreated two sounds it knew extremely well while I was drifting toward sleep. That is certainly the explanation I would give if someone else told me this story. I would tell them about auditory hallucinations during the transition into sleep. I would tell them exhaustion and heat probably contributed. I would remind them that the human brain can do very strange things. And I would probably be right. But when it happens to you, logic feels less comforting, because I remember that moment when the gates started moving. I remember lying there with my elbows against the mattress. I remember counting. 4, 3, 2, 1, clank. I remember knowing that nobody should have been there. I remember walking toward the window on my toes for no sensible reason. And I remember the exact feeling when I pulled the curtain aside and found the gates closed. That sudden coldness on the back of my neck. That feeling that something was wrong, even though there was nothing to see. Then the car. The familiar engine starting directly beneath me. My own car calling me downstairs in a way. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed in the bedroom. What if I had not gone down to check? Would I have heard the garage door opening next? Would I have heard the car driving away? Would something else have started? The front door opening? Footsteps climbing the stairs? My wife calling my name from downstairs even though she was thousands of miles away? I do not know. And I am glad I never found out. I also wonder whether I truly woke up when I ran downstairs. That thought bothers me more than anything else. What if I had been asleep from the moment I first decided to take a nap? What if getting out of bed, checking the gates, hearing the car, running downstairs, and sitting in the living room were all part of some unusually realistic dream? Then when did I wake up? In the chair? At dinner? The next morning? There was no moment where the world suddenly changed. No obvious waking point. Everything simply continued. That is what makes the border between sleeping and waking so unsettling. We like to imagine there is a clear line. One moment you are asleep, the next moment you are awake. But sometimes there isn't. Sometimes consciousness seems to fade in and out quietly. And when that happens, reality can become surprisingly difficult to prove. These days, if I feel sleepy in the afternoon, I usually fight it. I drink coffee. I walk around. I take that cold shower. Anything except lying down. It is not that I am terrified of sleeping during the day. I would not go that far, but I do not particularly want to hear anything else. The gates still make the same noise. The motor groans. The metal complains. 7 seconds into the opening cycle, there is still that familiar clank. Every time I hear it now, I find myself listening until the gates finish moving. 14 seconds. Then, silence. Sometimes I even look outside to make sure they are actually open. The Smart is getting old, too. It still makes that ridiculous vacuum cleaner sound whenever I drive it. Most days I laugh about it. But occasionally when I am upstairs and hear a vehicle starting somewhere nearby, I stop whatever I am doing and listen. Just for a second. Just to make sure. Nothing like that afternoon has happened again. No unexplained sounds, no strange movements, no voices, no nightmares that continued after I woke up. Maybe that should settle the matter. It was exhaustion, heat, humidity, a brain halfway into a dream. Absolute nonsense. That is what I called it then. That is what I still tell myself now. Absolute nonsense. And yet, whenever I remember that afternoon, my body reacts before my mind can explain anything. The back of my neck goes cold. My shoulders tighten. And for just a moment, I am back in that hot bedroom, half raised from the mattress, listening to a gate that is not moving open exactly as it has thousands of times before. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, clank, then 14 seconds later, silence. I suppose that is the most frightening part. Nothing happened. Nothing was there. Nothing changed. And even after all this time, I still cannot explain what I heard, or whether I heard it at all. Maybe I was dreaming. Maybe I was awake. Maybe I was somewhere in between. Whatever the truth is, one thing remains certain. For something that was supposedly just nonsense, it has stayed with me for a very long time. Story 4. I was getting tired of living in a tiny apartment in the middle of the city. The place felt like a shoebox. My roommate was careless, messy, and somehow managed to make even a small space feel more crowded than it already was. There was always something on the floor. Dirty dishes in the sink, music playing too loudly, or someone shouting outside the building at 3 in the morning. I wanted somewhere quieter, somewhere slower, somewhere with space. More than anything, I wanted a proper garden. At the apartment, I had a tiny balcony where I had somehow managed to fit 3 tomato plants, a few herbs, and several flower pots. I loved those plants, but calling it a garden felt generous. Everything was pushed together so tightly that the leaves constantly overlapped, and watering one pot usually meant spilling water into 3 others. My dream was to have real garden beds, rows of vegetables, flowers, maybe some berry bushes, a place where I could walk outside in the morning with coffee and spend hours working in the soil. Eventually, I decided I was done waiting. I wanted to buy a house. I was fortunate enough to have a decent job that paid well, and because I had spent years living in that miserable apartment, I had managed to save a fair amount of money. I didn't want another place in the city. I wanted to move farther out. somewhere surrounded by country roads, farms, open land, and trees. I actually started looking more than a year before I found the house. There were plenty of properties available, but nothing felt right. Some houses were too expensive. Others needed too much work. Some had no land. Some had plenty of land, but were so far from everything that even I thought it would be too isolated. Then I saw the listing. The moment I saw the pictures, I knew I wanted to visit. It was a beautiful two-story farmhouse sitting on a large piece of land. The back of the property ended at a thick forest, and there were already several garden plots behind the house. That alone nearly sold me. The house had a wide wrap-around porch and an old porch swing hanging near the front door. The outside needed some work. The paint was faded in places, several boards looked weathered, and the roof would probably need attention within a few years. Inside wasn't much better. The kitchen was old. The wallpaper in several rooms looked like it had survived at least 3 different decades. The bathrooms needed updating. Some floors were scratched, and several windows looked like they should eventually be replaced. But none of that bothered me. I saw potential. I could already imagine what it would look like after a few years of work. A fresh coat of paint, new kitchen cabinets, a larger garden, maybe a greenhouse. It could become exactly the kind of home I had always wanted. Then there was the price. It was surprisingly affordable. Too affordable, if I'm being honest. Looking back now, I should have questioned that more. At the time, I just thought I'd gotten lucky. There was one detail that did bother me slightly. The house had changed owners several times. When I spoke with a realtor, I learned that 3 different people had owned the property within only a couple of years. That seemed unusual. Why does everyone keep selling? I asked. The realtor gave me the usual professional smile. Older homes can be a lot of work. Sometimes buyers underestimate how much time and money renovations require. That explanation made sense. When I visited the property myself, I noticed plenty of small repairs that would eventually need attention. Nothing serious, just enough to keep someone busy. I assumed the previous owners had probably bought the place, imagining some beautiful countryside renovation project, then realized how expensive and exhausting it actually was. The funny thing is, that was exactly what I wanted to do. Maybe that made me a hypocrite. Still, I wasn't going to be careless. Before making an offer, I hired more than one inspector to go through the house. I also asked a friend of mine who had worked in construction for years to come out and look around. He checked the foundation, roof, wiring, plumbing, and a dozen other things I barely understood. His final opinion was simple. The place needs work, but there's nothing here that should scare you away. If only he knew. I made the offer. After weeks of paperwork, calls, inspections, and stress, the house officially became mine. Moving day gave me my first reality check. I had almost no furniture. Everything I owned had looked like a lot when it was crammed into a tiny apartment. Once I spread those same belongings throughout a 2-story house, it looked pathetic. I had one couch, a coffee table, a bed, one set of dishes and cutlery, a small television, a couple of lamps. That was basically it. Several rooms were completely empty. I remember standing in the dining room and laughing because I didn't even own a dining table. Before I started any serious renovations, I was clearly going to need furniture. Still, I was excited. I spent my first day unpacking clothes, organizing the kitchen, putting toiletries into the bathrooms, and walking from room to room making lists. Dining table, chairs, bookshelves, curtains, bedroom furniture, maybe a second couch. By late evening, the house looked slightly more lived in. Then the sun went down. That was my second reality check. The countryside gets dark. I mean really dark. I had lived my entire adult life in places filled with streetlights, headlights, signs, apartment windows, and general city glow. Even at 2 in the morning, there was always light somewhere. Here, darkness swallowed everything. I had lights inside the house. There were a few weak porch lights. The previous owner had also left several solar-powered lights around the garden beds. Beyond those small circles of light, there was nothing, just blackness. The first time I stood in my kitchen and looked out toward the backyard, I felt strangely exposed. I knew there were almost no neighbors nearby. That should have made me feel more private. Instead, I hated the idea that someone could stand outside and look into my house while I wouldn't be able to see them. I only owned one set of curtains. I had already hung them in my bedroom. I decided buying curtains for every other window would be my first job the following morning. That night, I was unpacking one final box in the kitchen. I placed several glasses into a cupboard and glanced toward the window over the counter. Because the lights were on inside, I could see my own reflection in the glass. I stared at it for a second. Then, I focused beyond the reflection. The backyard appeared faintly outside. The solar lights created several soft yellow circles around the old garden beds. Past them stood the forest, a dark line of trees. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe 30 seconds, maybe several minutes. But the longer I stared, the more uncomfortable I became. There was this strange feeling in my stomach. A pressure, like my eyes were searching for something, like something was there and I simply wasn't seeing it. I stared harder. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. Still, the feeling became so strong that I actually started feeling sick. Eventually, I stepped away. "This is stupid," I whispered. It was my first night. A new house, a new environment. I wasn't used to being alone somewhere so quiet. That had to be all it was. I turned off the lights downstairs and went upstairs. After brushing my teeth and washing my face, I opened my bedroom window. Cool summer air entered the room. It smelled like grass, soil, and trees. For a moment, I felt relaxed. Then something snapped outside. A twig, or maybe a small branch. I froze. My first instinct was to look through the window. Instead, I quickly crossed the bedroom and turned off the light. The room became dark. I returned to the window. Slowly, my eyes adjusted. The backyard was barely visible. I could make out the garden lights, the edge of the forest. Then, something moved, just beyond the reach of the lights. It happened so quickly that I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. A shape shifted between the trees. The movement was small, but whatever had moved looked large, very large. My heart started beating faster. I remained at the window, staring. Nothing else happened. After another minute, I forced myself to relax. "You're in the country now," I told myself quietly. There were animals here. Deer, coyotes, maybe bears. I had spent years in a city. Of course, hearing and seeing wildlife would feel strange at first. I closed the curtains. Then I went to bed. By morning, I had almost forgotten about it. I made breakfast and continued organizing the house. Afterward, I decided to work outside. The garden beds were one of the main reasons I had bought the place, and I wanted to see what condition they were really in. It was already too late in the season to plant much, but I could at least clear them out and prepare everything for the following year. I pulled on rubber boots, grabbed my gardening tools, and put on a sun hat. Then I walked down the back steps. There were several rows of old garden beds stretching toward the forest. The stone path leading between them was badly overgrown. Weeds filled the beds. Dead leaves covered the soil. Branches and other debris were scattered everywhere. It was going to take a lot of work, but I loved it. There was something peaceful about pulling weeds and cleaning soil. Instead of car horns and arguments coming through thin apartment walls, I heard birds. Leaves, wind moving through the trees. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had made the right choice. I worked for maybe an hour. Then, while turning to place a pile of weeds beside me, I noticed something near the forest. I stopped. The final row of garden beds sat around 10 feet from the trees. About 2 feet before the tree line, there was a narrow strip of worn ground. At first, I thought it was an animal trail. That would make sense. Deer or other animals probably use the edge of the forest regularly. But when I stood and looked more carefully, I realized something strange. The path didn't continue beyond my property. It stretched only from one side of my backyard to the other. The grass had been pressed down. The soil looked compacted. Whatever had created the trail hadn't simply passed through. It had moved back and forth. Repeatedly, pacing, I stared at it. Was that normal? Did deer pace along property lines? I followed the trail with my eyes. At the center, another narrow path branched away. That one went directly into the forest. I sat back on my heels. Suddenly, I remembered the movement from the night before. The shape I had seen. It had been near this exact area. A small wave of anxiety moved through me. If I hadn't seen something the previous night, I probably wouldn't have thought much about the trail. But now the two things connected in my mind. Something had been walking back and forth along the forest edge. Something large. I studied the trees. The forest was incredibly dense. The canopy blocked most of the sunlight. After the first few rows of trunks, it became almost completely dark. I couldn't see more than several feet inside. Again, I had that same feeling. My eyes wanted to find something. I felt like something was staring back. But there was nothing. The darkness between the trees looked almost solid. Someone could have been standing 5 feet inside the forest, waving at me. And I probably wouldn't have noticed. I continued working. But from that moment on, I never turned my back completely toward the forest. A few hours later, I went inside for lunch. When I reached the back door, I pulled on the screen door handle. It didn't open. I tried again. The handle seemed jammed. I had to move it back and forth several times before it finally released. Great, I said aloud. Another thing to replace. I went inside. After eating a bologna and cheese sandwich, I drove into the city. I bought curtains. Lots of them. One set for every window. I spent the afternoon putting them up. By sunset, every window was covered.